Good evening, everybody. My name is Rami Ozeri. I'm the founder and director of the Jerusalem Biennale. And we're here for an evening of conversation with friends for Yom HaShoah 2021. The Jerusalem Biennale is always interested in art that has some connection to the Jewish world of content. And one of the major fields within this field is the art that has some connection to the Shoah, to the Holocaust, and to the memory of the Holocaust and the survivors. So I'm very pleased to host this evening dear friends of mine. First is Doni Silver Simmons. Doni is internationally exhibited visual and performance artist. Her work explores time, memory, and identity through its inherent quietude and repetitive variations. Tony, good afternoon for you.
Morning.
Oh, sorry, good morning. For the East Coast, it's...
Morning. Coffee.
So Doni is based in Los Angeles, as well as also Michelle Green-Willner, who is here with us today. Michelle Green-Willner is a dramatic and evocative award-winning composer. Her compositions and multidisciplinary works have been commissioned and performed internationally. So good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this honor. Looking forward.
We're very, very happy and honored to have both of you. We have a last minute join by Nadav Neuhauser, who is now in New Jersey, and he will tell us a little bit later about the Lonka project and his part in the project. So I would like to start with showing the first video by Michelle Green-Willner and Doni Silver Simmons, made especially for the 2021 Memorial Day for Yom HaShoah. So go ahead. So, Doni, Michelle, can you tell us a little bit how this piece was born after this unusual year? I'm sure it has a nice story.
Michelle, do you want to start with that?
Yes, sure. I'm just, I'm sorry, once I dropped the screen, I got out of my.
Yeah,
still
we
see me?
see you, we hear
Thank
you.
All right. So this piece was basically born because I saw the headlines well, here we just quote Times of Israel and CBS News, but it was basically all over the place that that so many COVID, unfortunately, that Holocaust survivors had died from COVID in Israel this past year. And being the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, it really hit me. Also not seeing my parents for now over a year, since January 2020, that I needed to express something about it. And so I gave Doni a call and asked her what she thought about this idea. And we started to speak about which videos or scrims might be suitable for this piece called Adonai Ma'adam. And we came up with this video that I think speaks, because of those falling threads, speaks to all those that were lost. If I can maybe just start with that, and then we'll speak more about the music itself, if Doni wants to jump in.
Yeah, so when Michelle called me about this, it seemed very, very poignant that not only had so many Holocaust survivors, after the horror they had been through, lost their lives with COVID, a plague, and that juxtaposed with the vaccinations in relation to Auschwitz was very, very powerful for me. And because so much of my work is about marking time, the dissolution of materials to create something else, I was really excited about it. And we went through a lot of iterations. We talked about it for a long time. It came together very quickly in the end. And we used the two pieces. Enigma is the first piece. Maybe you could put that up, Rami. The Enigma painting, which, I mean, Enigma is about mystery, and it's about the darkness of the event with the time behind it, which is very colorful. So there's a positivity and a negativity to that painting. And we started with that. And then the addendum video, maybe you can put that one up, Rami, the image of the threads falling. Those threads, we thought we would film for 1 hour. Let's see if we can get that up. That's the still image right above that. Yeah, right there. Yep. Those threads actually were pulled from a full canvas. In the dissolution of the fabric, I was looking for a source. And then we dropped the threads from a very large structure that I was standing on top of. We thought it would take an hour, but instead the threads followed the air currents of the studio. And I remember that it was as if these were lives. They were floating on what was available, on the air currents that were available. And then they found their resting place on this brown area. And when Michelle called, I thought this would be a good piece for this, especially with the music she was using. And we had worked with that music and that violinist before, so I knew what we were doing, and it was just a very exciting process.
If I could speak about the music itself, the music was born out of the text, which is the introduction to the Yizkor, to the Remembrance Prayer. And Adonai Ma'adam discusses how frail man is, but that also that every day we have some type of renewal. And so I wanted to write a piece that had these this kind of ABA format, where there is that first melody, which in itself has this kind of this counterpoint. It is, you know, full of a little bit full of fear and questioning about the frailty of man. And then there's the second melody, which is more optimistic, let's say. It speaks more about this hope, this renewed hope for every renewed day. And finally, the first melody returning again, a step lower, with those, you know, octaves, with more weight, and giving the subject weight, and those eerie harmonics, displaying that even though we've returned, we're returning with some sense of faith and some sense of hope. And so, since we're discussing memory today, one says that the way that one can appreciate the passing of someone is to either give tzedakah, give charity, or good deeds in their honor, or bring about some kind of a personality that that person represents in some kind of action. And so the story within the story is here too. We hope that this returning melody, that there's some type of faith, some type of hope, that we also will be able to appreciate that person's being. And I think those wonderful cascading threads, even though they are random, there is a sense of repetition there as well. So it all seems to really go together beautifully.
Thank you. I think we will discuss further more about the importance of music and about the visual images in the next hour. But I want to go to the next video. The video that we just saw is not the first collaboration between Michelle and Doni. I think it started back in 2016, and this video that we'll show now, called Reverberations, was made as an early collaboration between Doni and Michelle. So Michelle, let me try and now share the screen. I'm sorry, not from here, but from the YouTube. Let's see if it works.
The sound is very low. You can't really hear it.
I hear it.
No? Okay, so we'll have to do it again through your computer, Michelle.
That's
Is that okay?
Here we go.
Okay.
Both. And when they sprayed my back, there flowed much blood. They shoot, and I really believed that my blood would cover the stain. A second barrage of bullets. I really believed that my blood would cover the stain. This way, or that way. But no sun had come. The mouth and the hand both had lied. The mouth and the hand both had lied. And I say blood, they say paint.
So I think the start point of this piece is the quote, but by Elie Wiesel about reverberations. Whatever happened in the past still present in our lives. And Doni and Michelle, you decided to take part in creating the memory of the Shoah, and but you decided to do it through art, through music. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating this piece, and how was the work with the actors, with the dancers? How was the combination between the music and the visual parts? Where was it showed? Please share with us.
So this was a very elaborate process. I met Michelle at a Shabbat lunch in my house, and we started talking, and she had a project that she was doing at the Museum of Tolerance, proscenium stage with her work. And she wanted, by the end of our conversation, she found out I was an artist, and she thought maybe she could use some images of mine as background for scrims on the stage. She very generously invited me to come and look at the space and meet with her. And when I walked into the Museum of Tolerance, the entrance lobby, the rotunda, everything spoke to me. And I immediately, as the video shows at the beginning, saw those windows that were open. And I thought, we should put pendulums in the windows, people rocking back and forth, showing time, the movement of time. And then the whole thing exploded. And as I say, Michelle very generously completely revamped the program. And we started with a very abstract performance in the lobby, the rotunda, then moved into the stage, the theater, and did the proscenium stage, and then back out. And you see the actors at the end going up the rotunda, hopefully indicating symbolically moving to a better life, leaving their hats behind, modernizing. And on the shadows on the ceiling, you see essentially, again, symbolically, the ghosts of the past and the horror being left behind. It was an extraordinary experience. It was the first time in my life I had taken on all roles with the performance, directing, writing, creating, costuming, doing an open call. We ended up with a cast that was primarily not Jewish and had no awareness of Kristallnacht, let alone much of the Holocaust. And the auditions were for the dancers. I had them rocking. They had to rock for 20 minutes in a box to see if they could perform the pendulums. And then I gave them some of the poems. One of them we will show in the next video, and had them interpreted immediately to see if they had any sensitivity to this concept. It was an amazing experience. The actors and actresses and the dancers at the end were crying. They thanked all of us, Michelle and myself, for the experience. They were sensitized to behavior, the terrifying behavior of societies against others, the others. It was amazing. The dancers were people who performed very beautiful things. And as I'll mention later with one of the other videos, getting them to not be so beautiful was hard. There was a lot of reading. They had a tremendous amount of homework to do based on this project. Also, I wanted to mention that to bring them even closer, all of the costumes were authentic from the 1930s, so that they would embody all of that story in their performance. Yeah. I can't hear you, Rami.
Yeah, so we spoke before about the way art can expand the way of memory. So I think it's true both for the music and for the visuals. And of course, being there in the museum was probably a very meaningful experience, more than you can see in the video, even though this video is very powerful. Michelle, can you say a little bit about the way you see the connection between music and memory?
Of course. So as Doni mentioned at the beginning of this whole journey, there was really just the suite, which you're going to see soon, one of the movements from that. And I thought that Doni would just have backup scrims, for my suite being performed on the stage. But as we began to learn what each of us could do, I think it was, really, really exciting. The quote, "Reverberations from the past affects what occurs today," I heard in a talk of Elie Wiesel that he gave on the 70th anniversary of Kristallnacht, which was given at the 92nd Street Y. And I found it to be so profound, not only for Kristallnacht, but also for so many different, movements or anti-movements that are happening around the country. And also for all this poetry that I found that did not necessarily have to do with the Holocaust, basically had to do with violence and how do we react to that violence, and what type of after effects are we dealing with from that violence. So Kristallnacht and that quote was really a jumping off point. The other thing that came into mind was Elie Wiesel had mentioned that he had grown up with wonderful Yiddish songs in his childhood. And he had now developed a concert of him singing those Yiddish songs, even though he wasn't a professional singer. So of course I got my hands on that music, and I chose two folk songs. I don't know if you would have recognized them from that little clip, but the two folk songs, Eufen Pripitschik by Warshawski, and Raisins and Almonds, which was made very popular by Goldfaden's arrangement of it, And these two folk songs, basically, I just took tiny little kernels, and I think some of them are noticeable. But what I did for the opening piece, titled Reverberations, is I handed Sharon Jackson the music, and I asked if she could play it on an electronic violin, because I thought that with that ability, we could use the delays, we could use all the reverberations from the strings themselves, from the tones, and create this kind of quasi dream sequences to remind us of what was life like pre-Kristallnacht. And so we had three different movements in that work. One was the pre, where you heard all those little clips. And then during, this time where things were starting to collapse historically. So how did those melodies collapse, and what happened with them? And you hear the Nazi perpetrators coming with kind of that sharp, punctuation, which you heard right at the beginning of the clip. And then you're going to see later on the coda, the end, basically the relentless grief that occurs at the end of the Holocaust. So all these things, I think, worked within, not only memorializing, but also bringing back certain memories and melodies that were prevalent pre-Kristallnacht.
I would like to add that the photographer for this piece had, again, no experience with the Holocaust at all. And having it at the Museum of Tolerance was very powerful. But they put up on all of the first 3 or 4 rows of seats, they put a sign that said survivor. Those seats were reserved for the survivors. And as we did rehearsals and brought people in, the fact that they could see that repeated word, survivor, 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 it made it even more powerful for all of the cast and crew. And it brought in that whole idea of our memory, our experience, and turning it, as you mentioned when we first spoke, Rami, turning it over to a new generation and making sure there was an awareness of what this really meant, that it wasn't just a story, it was a real experience.
And I must say that a lot of those survivors, and even other people in the audience that recognized those two tunes that were being used, we learned so much about how music that you learned in your childhood really triggers a memory. If you haven't even heard that tune in 30 years and then you go ahead and hear it, it really triggers the place where you were, where you heard that tune initially, what you were doing, maybe even smells. It really triggers all these different faculties. And that's something that I was really interested in presenting.
I think that's very important. I think the fact that music brings up like a memory, but I feel like a deeper way of reminding things, of feeling things. It's connected to the fact that those survivors were sitting there, and through the music, probably something opened, and some memories came up. But maybe for younger viewers and listeners and younger participants in this performance, it became like a stamp. So what they heard and what they felt when they sat in the same hall with the survivors will come up maybe in 20 or 30 years when they hear the same tunes, but it will be a very wide emotion, and not only like it will connect to the fact that they met those survivors in person, and that's something that is not going to be here always. Like very soon we will not be able to meet in person the survivors. And I would want to proceed with the third video that also I think is very relevant for the discussion about memory. It starts, I want you to notice that it starts with the quotes of the poet Amir Gilboa. And please take like a note to see that he speaks basically about memory. And I think what Tony and Michelle did in this piece, shown in the third video that we'll see, is taking this quote and opening it up and interpreting it through the music and through the art. So Michelle, I will ask you to share the third video.
Yes. Should we speak first or share it first?
I think share it.
Okay.
Rami, could I ask you when we come back on just to speak a little louder? My computer isn't picking up your
I'm
sound.
sorry. Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
A poem, a reflection.
So the starting point of this piece was Amir Gilboa saying, you know, a stone is always a stone and a tree is always a tree, but when it comes to blood, sometimes for some people it's not blood, it's paint. And some people refuse to remember things as they were. Um, what was your attitude to this quote, and can you explain a little bit what did you do with it?
I'm sorry, Rami, could you repeat that, please? I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, can you
Yeah,
tell
now I
us
can hear you.
what did you do with this quote, with this powerful quote about our tendency not to want to remember things as they were when it comes to like blood. And I think the fact that blood and paint here is playing is not a coincidence. It's something powerful that talks about memory and visuals. So Doni, maybe as a visual artist, you can say what was the meaning of this quote when you started the process?
So we used 3 different poems in this piece, and I don't usually work from poetry or from literature and move forward from that as a source. It is a process that Michelle uses beautifully. So coming in and in my collaborations with Michelle, I've taken on that process. This poem for me was extraordinary. Of course, using the word paint, which I understand on one level, but the juxtaposition of blood and paint was extraordinary, just extraordinary. And the power of it it was just very powerful for me. I put a Greek chorus behind the main dancer. I realized that, and then I used it repeatedly through the rest of the performance, that the echo of other layers of concepts could be performed by the Greek chorus as the lead performer was dealing specifically with those words. And you see, even in that movement where her arms are very exaggerated and she's bent over, the the emotional reaction to that concept of someone thinking that blood is just a color, it's just paint, as opposed to connecting it with humanity. So that was amazing. I also love the music on this piece, which is so aligned to the text. So hopefully we actually did that. We got the performance and the sound and the color of the lighting and all of it to coalesce and become one unit. I felt very, very good about this, particularly successful in its integration, in its expression, and even sensing the audience at the very end when the word paint came on. That there's a tension you feel as the audience has to respond to that. Yeah.
This quote was also in reverberations, right? You used the same quote there also with the dancers.
Yes, this is part of reverberations.
Oh.
And actually, all of the poems had this element, an element of mystery, an element of surprise, and an element of echoing that transition into Kristallnacht and the Holocaust. Yeah.
So the 3 poems from the suite, The Stain of Blood, are all from 3 different generations of Israeli poets. I started with Avram ben Yitzchak, moved to Amir Gilboa, and ended with David Avidan. Of course, Avram ben Yitzchak was not alive when I came to visit Israel, but Amir Gilboa had just passed away, and his wife met with me and signed off a beautiful little book of poetry by Amir Gilboa, which this poem was inside that, and she was very excited about this. And David Avidan, I did end up meeting with him, and he actually listened to the piece first and then signed his signed his name off on it. So all of them, the reason why I chose them is because they were all speaking about this kind of violence, but when do we not acknowledge the violence? When are our reactions not transparent? And that, of course, even happens right now in our world. So that's really what triggered me. And in terms of the music, I wanted something very dense. You might notice that the harmonies are very, very chromatic. We still have like repetitions of little motives, and that's kind of robotic, just like the poem itself, which repeats that line and has this also repetitive nature to its format. And it's very angular. By the way, the first reiteration of this music was also included. This piece was originally sung by a mezzo-soprano, and I decided to change it. And there was a violinist as well. I decided to rearrange it for the bass clarinet and the bass baritone because I felt like I wanted it even darker. So I think that comes across now that it's pretty dark.
Well, from the memory of the actual events and the horror and the darkness of the Shoah and what happened in the Holocaust, I want to move now to the memory of the people, the memory of those who were there, and the memory of them, not their memories, but the memory of them as people who survived this, who passed through, who got over this evil and survived and came to life and created continuity. And I think there's a very good example for the use of art in order to do that with the Lonka project that I came across lately and now being presented in Jerusalem in the Safra Square. I'm very, very proud to be able to be part of this project in a small way. It was initiated by Jim and Rina a few years ago. So I will tell you a little bit about the Lonka project with the images in the background. So it's basically a project that get professional photographers to meet survivors and take photos of them. So you'll see here a few of the examples. I made like the story of each one of them here, but I feel like it's gonna be hard for me, and please forgive me, to describe each of them. I will just say the names. This is Yuda Havesh that was born in Hungary, in Giselle Sikovic was born in Czechoslovakia. The Rabbi Menachem Mendel Taub was born in Transylvania. All of them are Holocaust survivors that met participants, photographers in the Lonka project, and they created some kind of a portrait. David Langa, Peggy Parnes, Sonia Kam and Hani Dauman, Renta Laksova, 4 Auschwitz survivors, Shmuel Blumenfeld, Yehuda Mimon, Baruch Kasher, and Tommy Schwartz. Morad Perlov, Andrea Anati, and this is a good time to bring into the conversation Nadav. Nadav, you were listening so far to Doni and Michelle describing their process, combining art and music and the memory of the Shoah. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this portrait that you made as part of the Lonka project.
Now you can hear me.
Yes.
Rina and Jean that organize this project, that for now it's around 250 professional. Most of us are photojournalists, quite well known, working in the field. They decide to create a long run memory of portraits, still portraits of people that still live among us, but they're basically going to disappear soon. And they contact me to take one of these portraits, and they give me a few names. And then I told them, listen, there is one person, if I can choose, it's Gera. He's basically like my second father. I know him since I was a kid. He took my mom to the labor, to labor because my father was not at home. So I know him since I was a kid. The only thing that we knew about him is that he's a Holocaust survivor. He never, ever spoke about what he passed. And I told him, I don't know if he will agree because he's not speaking, he's not talking about it. But let me try. And they told me, okay, go ahead. And I was in Israel in that time. And I went to visit him. And I told him, Gera, listen, I'm part of this project, Lonka project, and this is what they're doing. Is it possible that I will take a portrait of yours? And he's like, sure. And I was surprised. And as a journalist, because this is what I'm doing in life, I asked him, it's involved also me coming with a little camera, put a mic on you, and maybe we can do a little interview and you will tell me a little bit about it. And and he said yes, and I was very surprised. And basically I put a mic on him, and it was like a dome that opened, I didn't have to ask nothing, and it just 3.5 hours of talking about what he passed. And I choose to take this picture. From the moment that I spoke with him, I understood that this is what I want. These are areas that I grew up also. It's next to Beersheba. This is where I grew up. This is where he's living. And it's totally a contrast from where he's coming, because this is a desert town. And he comes from Hungary. And his memory, it's a lot of cold weather during the Holocaust. And basically, one of the big story, if I can call it a big story, in his Holocaust experience, is when his mom, they gathered them and they put them on a train. I will try to make it short. They gathered them and they put them on a train. And when the train stopped after a few hours, what he remembers that he barely breathed. And they open the door that air can come into the wagons. And his mom and her sister take all her jewelries out, and they call a local guard, and they gave them everything, and they told them, now you go. And she took Gera, and basically she gave him a kiss and told him, just be a mensch. Don't forget where you're coming from, but never tell who you are really. Never ever. But just remember. And she threw him out of this train with his cousin, the son of her sister, and basically carry him all the war. That, you know, they got to Hungary quite late, but all these months he carried him. They got into the ghetto back by foot. They were walking. You don't know for how long, but that moment that he knew that this is the last time that he's going to see his mom. He was a little kid. He was like, I think 8, but he knew it, that this is the last time that I see mama. I never saw Gera cry. He's a tough man. He's super tough. He was a truck driver with my father. And I remember as a kid, he saw some other kids that bullying me in the neighborhood, and I start to cry. And he's like, he kicks them away, and he's like, he shouted at me like, why are you crying here in the street? And I'm like, because they beat me up. And he's like, crying don't help you in life. Or you beat them back, or you run away. Crying not helping you. Now go home. And I remember that. Crying is not helping you to survive. This is his lesson. And before the interviews that I did with him, I talked with his kids that was friends of mine, like they are friends of mine until today, because we grew up in the same neighborhood. And I asked him, what do you know, that I didn't know what to ask him? And basically they didn't know nothing, almost. They knew a few anecdotes, but they didn't know a lot. And that was the first time that this man was talking. And at the end of the interview, I asked him, Gera, you know, all these years we knew that you're surviving. Why you didn't tell us all that? As his answer was, nobody asked.
I think that's very powerful. I think
for me, this light in this picture, that it's sunset light in the desert, it's a contrast to where he came from. Plus this sea as a proud man that standing there on the railway. This is kind of the place that he say goodbye to mom, was touching me. And the last thing that he said, I asked him, what is your message? And he's like, I win, I win, I win. This is how it ends, the interview.
This is very powerful, and I feel it's connected to the conversation we had, because it's the way art, in this case photography, can open up channels for experiences and connection, not only to the past events but also to the survivors as they are today. And I would just tell you that the Lonka project is beautiful. It's more than 250 photographers meeting different survivors and taking photos of them. And it's all in their website. It's a beautiful website. You should go there and take a look. You should, those of you who are in Jerusalem right now, please come visit the Safra Square to see those images in a large scale spread around the square. And then I want to sum up the conversation and ask you, I think the main question that I was trying to get to in this conversation, the main question is, what does art adds to the memory? Like, why do we need art? Like, I think in general we started from the fact that it's a very important part of Jewish recent history, what happened in the Holocaust, and just like in other ways, there's so many words that was written about what happened, so many texts, and then art adds something, and it's very tricky. It's very hard to put your hand on it and to point it. What is it that art is bringing as an added value to our efforts to remember, what happened, to remember those who survived. So what does art add to those efforts? Michelle, maybe you want to start?
Sure. And just, what Nadav was saying really brought back for me, because my father, like I said, is a survivor. I wish you would have a photographer to come and take his portrait too. But growing up, my father also never spoke about, different experiences in the camps. Baruch Hashem, all the siblings, 5 siblings and the parents survived. It's an amazing, miraculous story. And my father's always an optimist, always glass half full. That is the way he wanted us to be brought up. And only when actually my boys, and I've got 4 of them, only when the 4 of them went on their gap years to Israel and they went on a Poland trip to Auschwitz, and the people asked, please write a letter to your sons as they exit Auschwitz, so they'll have some hope once they exit. And so only at that moment did I call my father. I said, listen, they're requesting a letter. Would you be willing to tell me a few little nuggets for the boys? And my father for 3 hours went nonstop into different stories that happened. I was lucky. I was at my computer, typing away, typing all these things down. And now that became the letter to them. And, he was separated with his brothers and father from the girls and the mother. And after the war, there was a knock on the apartment door. My father, it turned out, was there by himself. And he opened the door and there stood his mother, who he didn't know had survived. He didn't know, and I said to my dad, what did you do when you saw your mom? And he said, she just gobbled me up with kisses. There were no words. And so the way I end this letter to my kids is, once you come home, I'm going to be gobbling you up with kisses because I'm proud of you that you took this journey and that you should have the faith and the optimism and the hope, just like Zeta has. So, in terms of memory and music, I know that Dr. Oliver Sacks, he always talks about how the place for memory in your brain is very close to those regions for memory, for emotion, for mood. And so I think that with the music, I hope to, elevate either the text or either the situation or either the experience to a different level. So you come away feeling like you've gained something from that experience that you might not have had beforehand.
Doni?
I just want to say, Nadav, the presentation was very, very powerful, and it's really important to come back to reality with all of this, not just the interpretation of art and music. And I think the fact that anyone had children after they were released from the camps is a testament to the optimism, and that we're here as and our responsibility is to keep that going. And the photographs are beyond powerful, just beyond. And I applaud you. And I applaud you, Rami, for including it's a gorgeous presentation. Our job is to archive the present, the past, and our vision of the future. That's our job. And as I mentioned to you before, Rami, I've said many times that artists create their own being. That prism that separates colors within us separates landscapes. And those landscapes within us are the avenues, the languages that we use to address the work that we create. And I think our responsibility is to create the work that will speak to that, will leave the archive of our time, the time we came from, the shoulders of those we stand on, and have some vision to the future. where artists are not afraid to go. You know, we resonate in that kind of standing on the edge of the cliff, if you will, of time, and we're ready to leap.
And if we bring it back
So
to
thank you.
Yeah, if we bring it back to Elie Wiesel, who spoke that, you know, our responsibility is bearing witness. So we have to decide how we bear witness. You know, what are our strengths that let us do so?
I can't hear you.
You can.
I can't hear you, Rami, sorry.
No, Nadav, would you like to?
Yeah, for me, just to make everything better, for me, photography, it's a language, it's a visual language. And if you will look at history, what working in our memory really, it's images. Every conflict or every historical moment, you will remember. In the old time, it was more stills images. Today, it's more videos. But it's an image that mark in our head. If it's from Vietnam War, we remember the girls that running naked within a plum. If it's from Berlin, we know the flag, it's images. And for me to create this portrait was also to mark Gera in the history that nobody will forget him. So for me, it was important not only as something global, but as something personal. But I can tell you that from what I heard from every photographer that met with a Holocaust survivor in this Lonka project, passed some kind of emotion and transformation with himself during this photo shoot. And part of them are not even Jewish people, you know, they are photographers from different religion, different countries, and everyone that met one of them to meet a survivor and to understand what he passed, it transformed you. And of course, that expressed in your photography, because photography is a language. Mm-hmm. And you can see it in the images, of course.
Well, yeah, I totally agree, and I would just like to say what I learned in this conversation tonight. So I've learned that sometimes the creative process is revealing new things. It's revealing the stories. It's revealing the emotions. It's revealing the connection between people. And sometimes the process, the creative process of making art connected to the memory of the Shoah is in a way an excuse to deal with those hard issues and to go back to them and to deliver them to other people. Doni mentioned before her work with the dancers, and Michelle mentioned the work with the musicians, and of course it's relevant for the Lonka project of meeting the survivors and through the process of taking photos of them, also finding their stories again. So this is one thing that I feel it's very important through the creative process to expand the conversation. I also feel like I have a very strong understanding now of the difference between different memories, ways of memories. So the mind remembers, the mind can have a memory, but I think the body remembers also, and maybe art and music helps us to remember through the body and not only through the mind. And maybe that's some kind of a powerful way to make sure that things are here to stay and they're not gonna fade out when time goes by. I want to thank you so much, for this conversation. I feel honored and privileged to be able to do this conversation around Yom HaShoah and to talk with you. It's fascinating to hear about your work. Um, I was I said I will try to end on time, and we're more than an hour talking, but I feel like we should say thank you so much with like a last video that we plan to show. This will be described now by Doni and Michelle shortly, please. And then we'll show the video. We will officially end the conversation, but you are more than welcome to stay and ask questions and continue afterwards. So please, Doni, can you give us like the preface to the last video?
So in relation to your comments, Nadav, it occurred to me that one of the things that we as human beings love is looking at our own species. And uh, when we see the body, when we see people, we can access information much faster. That dealing in the abstract, you work harder, the audience works harder, the artist works harder. So this final piece is a juxtaposition of both. We're using bodies as language, we're using abstraction as language, but I think in its simplicity, in the cleanness of its presentation, the coda, which we're about to see, sums up the entirety of today's conversation. It is a dancer and a musician simply performing to and with each other. And in the coda, I was responsible for the dancer. Michelle was responsible for the musician. In this particular one, it was performed differently, but in our reverberations program, that's how it divided its responsibility. I must say and give credit to Nicole Powell, the dancer who did the most amazing choreography. This is her choreography. I acted as director and directed her through it. It is the only thing I must say is that Nicole is beautiful, and she at that time created beautiful movements. And I remember working very, very closely with her to make sure that the beauty was taken out and was replaced with reality. So at times her foot will bend at an angle, or she pulls her arm down, and I told her that she had to imagine that she was running her hands over scars from the past, just to embody the concept. But it was an extraordinary experience, and hopefully we'll end this very well.
Yeah, just to say that this is definitely the tail end or the coda of the whole piece of reverberations, but this little piece has been become popular, so it's been performed in various locations. The one here you're going to see at Archer LA through a UCLA performance, and I just wanted you to listen to the starkness, the deliberate glissandi, which mimics those motions in the dancer. The repeated notes coming to nothing. They're both dressed in black. And just to say that Jeffrey Steinberg, the violinist, was excellent, because if we're discussing memory, I insisted that he play this from memory. And I think he did a marvelous job to really be able to internalize the whole message. So thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you, Michelle, and I remind you that you need to share it because my computer is like,
right.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just give me a second.
Up.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Doni. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Nadav, for joining and speaking about your creative process. And Erev Tov, everybody.